Well, here we are, the middle of winter, February the 8th. Waiting for my son. He has retinopathy. Uh, he's diabetes, end stage renal. So I got some time, and I'm reading this book in Reflections by the Ancient One. This is a book by the son of this notorious uh, leader of the Georgia Dixie Mafia, Billy Burt. And he had killed 52 people reportedly. Never convicted. He was in prison for 36 years. Died at age 80. He was born the same year I was, 1935. But he had a lot of admirable characteristics. This is written by his son. His name was Billy Stonewall Burt. His father was Billy Sunday Burt. I don't know that derivation, and he has a grandson that's Billy Stonewall Burt Jr. They call him Stonewall. The son's name, they call him Stony, and of course Billy was the grandfather. And I met Stony last week. He gave me this book, and quite an interesting read. It was set in Winder, Georgia, and back then I think it was kind of like the Old West, pretty rough, and everybody had nicknames, and it's entirely different now. It's actually a suburb of, you might say, of Atlanta. It's growing out that way, and that's where I teach golf. And pretty interesting place. A lot of history, and I know a lot of the old timers, and I just was really mesmerized by this read. He had a compassion for people. He had integrity. He had his own code. He was a champion of the underdog. It's a sense of justice that he had, of his own justice. He took it into his own hands, because you couldn't rely on the lawmen of that time. His word was his bond, and he would never disregard a man being cruel to animals. I think he fractured the English. He didn't learn to read or write until his favorite teacher got a hold of him, and he was the undisputed best whiskey driver of all time, and he was generous, and we all think well of our fathers, and we hopefully retain the good features, but all of us have a dark side. This guy was really dark, and it was another time, and I knew a whiskey runner during the moonshine time. His name was Cowboy, and quite a character. Somebody should have written a book about his life. He talked to me a lot about how he had been shot, and he'd been in prison, but another side of the that fascinates me. And riding down here to Decatur from Lawrenceville, it's about 45-minute drive, hard driving through some traffic for Robert's appointment with Dr. Thomas. He has retinopathy, and that's a result of cancer. He had testicular cancer, and he didn't tend to it right away. It spread to his lymph nodes, and he had to do radiation and chemo, and that destroyed his immune system to a large degree, and then his diabetes set in, and he did 10 years. He didn't feel that bad, and he disregarded it, and now he's paying the price. So he's living with us, and he's just turned 60. So at 83, your kids are supposed to take care of you. Well, it's the other way around here, and I'm blessed. I'm vigorous. I play in 3 pool leagues. Last night, I dominated. I beat someone that was about 4th my age, in his 20s. And they asked me, "How old are you?" I said, "I'm 83. I was born in 1935. He said, they shake their heads. Well, age is just a number. And I say, well, old men rule. Old guys rule. And as you get older, you learn some things. And, I didn't get this old without learning some things. And, some things get better with age. I just can't remember what. Of course, I think wine and women are a couple. My wife is 83, and she's still vigorous and holding on. And so maybe it's because we need to take care of our son. He lives with us, and he's totally disabled with end-stage renal failure. But we're blessed because his eyesight is improving. He gets these injections in the eyeball for retinopathy. His diabetes is improving. His last A1C was 6.1, and we're blessed because we got a dog. Now we had a dog, Bootsy, when the kids were young. That was 50 years ago or more. But this dog is an Australian Shepherd, and called an Aussie. And Australian Shepherds they're derived from Europe, but they were bred to shepherd sheep and cattle, and they were used well in Australia, but mainly in the Southwest. So they're very smart and very disciplined. And Remy is a therapy dog, 10 years old, and so well mannered. Doesn't jump. I've only heard her bark once, and he waits for you to open the door until you give him the signal, and he's so got Robert. He's supposed to exercise, and he's on his computer and games, and now he's taking Remy to the dog park twice a day. And he's also walking him a couple times. He walked 3 miles yesterday. Wow, and he went out this morning and did some yard work. So that's really, so we are blessed. As I say, we're too blessed to be stressed. So there's stress in everybody's life, but golf shouldn't be one of them. And I had a great week in golf. I worked with a young high school aspiring player, and his clubs were awful. So his grandfather agreed to buy a set of irons. I sold them for $100, which is dirt cheap. They were my personal clubs. But in fact, they're the Pinhawk, and he liked them. And he's a center on his football team, so big lad. strong. But working with him is a blessing. And these are relationships that I've developed over the years. I went to the course yesterday, and I met so many people again. There was Nancy. She was out there practicing. She's the one that told me about this Australian Shepherd. She has a 1-year-old golden retriever, and she takes it to this dog trainer and shelter, and so that's where Remy was, and so that was a God thing, I think, providential. And her husband Brian's a real good friend, and I saw out there Dwayne. He was blown up in a mine accident in West Virginia 28 years ago. Wasn't expected to live. Was in a hospital for a long time in a wheelchair. Wasn't expected to walk. He's out there playing golf. He's got a brace on one leg, and he plays the old Winder course 3 times a week. And what therapy? That's therapy. Golf is therapy. And Monday, I had a playing lesson with a good friend. In fact, he plays in our Wednesday group. I call them my posses. His name is Steve. We have 2 Steves. He's Steve 1. And so we played 9 holes. Number 8, he had a good drive. We're playing best ball, just reflecting on some things, working on channel lock. And I hit a good drive. I picked up a wedge, lob wedge, which it's funny. I bought back, I thought in the shop, I thought it was a Cobra set. I thought, well, I used to play pretty good with this Cobra, and I thought I'd buy the set from Ed, the owner of B&E Golf, and the golf shop where I leased the teaching area. And I said, how much do you need for these, Ed? He said, well, Bob, those are your clubs. They were in a bag, and they'd put them in there. And anyway, I got back to them. I had some good shots, but didn't have a lob wedge in that group. So I picked up a lob wedge just in running 60 degree when I was going out to teach Steve. And here I had this 60 yards is my stock lob wedge distance. So I grabbed the lob wedge, and the first time I ever hit it, 60 yards on number 8, I hit a good shot. I could feel it. It was uphill. I knew I have to really hit into it. So I developed some pretty good club speed for me. Darn, I went up there, sailed up as pretty as you can, stopped hit about 8 feet from the hole, and rolled right at it. I thought maybe I could still see a little bit of I use a yellow optic ball, and I could see a little of it. I thought, well, I had done that once before at a hole-in-one. I was joining the little finger before rolling in, and it was in the morning, and there was dew tracks. You could see it was pretty neat, but that would have been my first hole-in-one. I've had 4, but this is kind of like a hole-in-one. And Steve said, I think that's in the hole, or lean against the flagstick. So we went up, and sure enough, as we were walking up there, the wind moved it a little bit, and then it dropped down in the hole. So that was pretty special, things you remember. And last night I won out with a length of the table bank, a reverse cut. Any pool players know that's a tough, even cross table, but down the table, the full length of the table, back in the back right, what we call the head of the table, and it went in just as pretty as can be, and the crowd cheered. Well, I think there was 1 or 2. I cheered. So this is what we live for, these moments. You forget about the bad ones. And I'm just reflecting, rambling, but some of you might be able to relate to what I go through. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. I grew up in a small rural, easy for you to say, area in western PA. Country is all get out. There were 18 graduating students, all one building. My high school sweetheart, there were 9 boys, 9 girls. She was one of the girls, thank goodness. And we're still, that's my first wife, still is, at 62 years ago. Had a great life. I go tomorrow. My golf is where I want to be with Channel Lock. I've got great relations. I love JH and Bill and what they've contributed. And just thank you for listening. And I hope you subscribe. This is a little bit of a ramble, but maybe some things you can learn from. And I've learned down the way from a lot of great mentors and associates. So keep the peace, keep locking, and write your own book and epitaph. Cheers. This is the Ancient One, signing off.